Okay, our program today is about Santa Cruz County's Climate Action Plan. We're delighted to have with us county representatives who will explain the Climate Action Plan, the county's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and the plan to adapt to negative impacts on climate change. We have quite a few speakers, so we're going to keep them on schedule today. And if you have questions, we'll ask you to hold them to the end. Our first speaker, and when I'm done introducing you, then you get to come take the mic away. Dave Reed is Director of the Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience. So I want you to remember that, Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience, or OR3, or I might call it OR cubed, because everyone here is from that OR3. Dave will introduce his program and provide an overall description of the activities and responsibilities for the office. Prior to his role with OR3, he served as a senior staff member for the 1st District Supervisor of Santa Cruz County for 8 years. He has also worked in public works and with our redevelopment agents. He has extensive experience with constituents, community organizing, project management, and public infrastructure. Dave was a former research scientist with USGS and has a master's in the science behind climate change and how our community and local government can prepare and respond to it. Actually, your master's in coastal geology. In his role as director of OR3, he seeks to serve the public to recover, adapt, innovate, and become more resilient. Thank you for coming this morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to talk a little bit about what the county is doing in support of our climate crisis that we're facing. So I'll be trying to be really brief, but as was mentioned, OR3 is often, people have a hard time remembering the 3 R's, so I just want to contextualize the 3 R's for everybody. So in 2020, August 16th, our lightning complex fire began. In the aftermath of that fire that destroyed over 900 homes, the county created the Office of Response, Recovery, and Resilience. What that is the combination of the traditional emergency management, emergency services, emergency response functions. So every jurisdiction in the county, throughout the state and country, has an emergency management arm, right? In a disaster of any kind, that emergency management organization steps forward to support community and the response to that natural disaster. So the first R, response, is that emergency management function. But what we learned and what we continue to learn in these latest 2 federally declared disasters is that recovery is as important for our community as the response. How do we support in the moment? But then recovery begins immediately in the weeks, months, and years after a natural disaster, trying to restore our community, to restore the loss that community members felt through fire, flood, landslide, or as we call it in the industry, straight line wind. That's what they're calling this latest series of storms, bomb cyclones, and all that. So recovery is an integral part of the response part. So that's our second R. And then our third R, and what we think here in our office is as a continuum, is that resilience part, right? So if we're just in the space of responding to and recovering from disaster, we're not addressing the root cause, what we know to be the root cause of most of our disasters, with the exception of earthquakes, which hopefully we don't have any of those anytime soon, is really climate-driven disaster, right? Climate-driven wildfires, climate-driven atmospheric rivers, and things of that nature. So we really want in our office to think holistically about all 3 of those things, because the integration of those things, I think, will make our community more resilient, make us better prepared to respond to and react to natural disaster. And so that's where those 3 R's came from. And that's why it's easiest just to remember OR3 or OR cubed, but it's response, recovery, and resilience. So with that, I'll stop and I'll pass it off. I think you're going to do the introduction.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tatiana Brennan. a senior administrative analyst in OR3. There is going to be a test at the end, so you have to tell me what the R's stand for in the right order. She is working towards making climate action accessible to all our community with a focus on those that are most impacted by changing climate. Tatiana holds a BA in anthropology with an emphasis on cultural ethnographies and a master's degree in social welfare from UC Berkeley. She will introduce the primary strategies of the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, which we call CAP, with 2 A's in the middle, the state policy landscape that informed the CAP, and the time frame for achieving its goals. Tatiana.
Hello. I'd like to start by just acknowledging that the 2022 CAP is really an update of the 2013 climate action strategy that we already had in this county. And I want to let you know, before I go into the CAP, that you can rest assured that your public servants have been working very hard on addressing climate change. So the primary goal in that plan was to establish Central Coast Community Energy. We call that 3CE. And the point of that was so that our community members did not have to rely on PG&E. They could get clean electric energy. And that started here in this county, and now it's become a regional organization. So I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge that the county has installed solar panels and is using heat pumps. So these have had a significant effect on bringing down our greenhouse gas emissions because of the footprint that the county has. And now I'd like to talk about the 2022 CAP. The 2022 CAP has strategies that are based on science, and the goal is to bring us into this new climate change era and really meet the challenges head on. And I want to start by telling you what those goal areas are. We have 7. The first is affordable housing. And the goal here is focused on increasing our housing stock, because we are seeing that having limited housing and the housing situation that we do is significantly impacting our greenhouse gas emissions. Number 2 is healthy ecosystems. That means supporting healthy forests and ag lands. 2 is healthy communities. We know that climate change affects health, so we want to focus on that area. Another is decarbonization. We need to achieve carbon net neutrality by 2045. That's our state goal. So that means that we need to eliminate our carbon output by 85%. The rest of that is carbon sequestration. It's huge. Another is resilience. That means that we're focusing on preparing, recovering, and adapting to climate change. And the last 2 are really focused on county work. Number 1 is staff engagement. We did this 2022 CAP in a different way than most county initiatives, especially climate action. And it's a way that we're moving forward in county processes. And that is that instead of having a select group of subject matter experts that design a plan or an initiative, what we did is we really pulled the expertise across the county. And we had work groups that were made up of all levels of county government, from directors to managers to union staff, designing these strategies because we wanted it to be their own CAP. We didn't want it to be something that they were just presented with. We wanted it to be theirs. Another is a programmatic approach. What that means is that we have measurable strategies. We have a process for monitoring, and we are going to be working on community engagement, hence this meeting. And now I want to tell you what we have been doing so far towards the CAP. Number one, we're moving forward with the goals with implementation. Two, we're working on transitioning our fleet to electric vehicles. Three is that we are founding members of a regional partnership with other counties and cities. And one of the first things that we're going to be doing is installing electric vehicle chargers across the region. Four is involving youth. The reality is that it is up to us to make sure that our youth are prepared to meet the challenges ahead. That is our job as stewards. And we take this very seriously at the county. And hence you see the 4 interns that are part of our climate policy internship. And it's important to us that we support youth across our county, north and south. And then number 5, on June 27th, we're going to have an update to the board. And we invite all of you to attend. And now I'd like to share with you what you can do. Number 1 is to decrease your carbon footprint. That means walking, biking more, purchasing an EV, electrifying your home, also supporting local environmental groups, and then also listening and engaging with youth. That's critically important, making sure that they know about what's happening in our climate, what they can do. And I would also like to invite you not just to listen to the students, but to talk with them afterwards. See if there's some way that you can offer any mentorship, if there's any way that you can make connections for them to facilitate their leadership role in climate, because they are hungry for it, they are talented, and they are willing to take the challenge. And I would like to just briefly tell you what they're all going to be speaking on. Kathleen is focused on adaptation, and she will walk you through our story map. If we can access it, if we can't, she's going to talk to you about what's in there. Ian Nieves is going to talk about climate change impacts on South County, as seen with this most recent storm. Rowena Bush is going to provide a bird's eye view into our housing crisis and the relationship to our decreasing greenhouse goals, decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions. Jennifer Hernandez is going to present the need for equitable policies to address climate change. And now I'd like to briefly address equity. For us, it is not just a word, it's really the entire key to really addressing climate change. And what I mean by that is that the things that I have asked you to do in terms of electrification are things that, and walking and biking are things that the wealthier members of our community can do. People that can afford to live in North County, people that can afford an EV, can afford to electrify. Half of our county are renters. That means that they can't electrify their home. And the cost of rent is so high that they often can't afford an EV. They can't install a charging station. So it's up to us to really think about how we can support the rest of our county and really think about landlords, because it's not just renters and we can't put the onus on them. We need to think about this. And our interns are going to touch on these issues. It's very important to us and we want you to know about it. And if there are any questions about how to become involved, we welcome that. And now I'd like to turn the presentation over to the interns. Yes, and I actually will turn it back over to our moderator who will introduce first. Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you. Does anybody remember what the middle R stands for? Recovery, gold stars. Okay, we are excited to have all the interns here today. So thank you for setting this program up like this. Kathleen, who's going to be our first speaker, receives her master's in environmental science from CSU Monterey Bay in weeks from now. So congratulations. She holds a bachelor's in natural resources. It would be a bachelor's in natural resources and environmental science, the focus on fish and wildlife conservation from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Is that how I say it? Close. Okay. With over a decade of field and lab experience, she has seen the effects of climate change in wildland habitats, and wants to pursue solutions through climate policy. So thank you, Kathleen, for joining us today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Kathleen McLaughlin, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with you all today. Receiving my master's degree in environmental science and working in wildlife biology has shaped my perspective and inspired my drive for climate action. On a personal level, climate action is important to me when I envision my future and consider the possibility of building a family once I further establish a career. And it is a major factor in what our future will look like. It contributes to a lot of uncertainty. My sister is an environmental scientist as well, and we go back and forth on bringing children into this world. If it would be inhabitable enough to even do so. Morally, there's just a lot going on right now. And it's a hard concept to grapple with. As a woman who has hope for the future, but also as a scientist who sees how much damage has been done and also how far we have to go. Urgent action from those presently in power and our communities as a whole is essential to ensuring a safe and livable environment for generations to come. While climate change is an extensive crisis that will affect all life on Earth, we have already seen in these early stages that the impacts fall on our most vulnerable communities. This could be due to such communities living in locations prone to climate-related health hazards, such as extreme heat, wildfires, as we've seen flooding most recently, poor air quality, and overall poorly maintained infrastructure and public lands can also pose additional threats to the safety and well-being of vulnerable communities. Ultimately, limited access to resources, care, and protection, along with other barriers, can also lead to disproportionate impacts on these vulnerable communities. And it's important to recognize that humans aren't the only vulnerable communities in our environment. Having worked with multiple sensitive species of special concern through fish and wildlife conservation management projects, I have learned how crucial habitat conservation is to protecting these populations that are negatively impacted by climate change. So my contribution to the CAP was an interactive story map created alongside with our consultants and Jenny Gomez with the county. And this tool uses GIS. So a story map allows the public to engage with this important climate initiative, and it makes this information accessible to the public. So the story map serves as an educational tool to captivate the audience, and they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So using powerful photographs from within our community and natural lands, it served as a user-friendly way to convey a lot of graphical information, and was an effective approach in today's age of technology. So I was going to walk you through an overview, but the link is posted on the county website, I believe, or if you just do a Google story map, County Santa Cruz CAP. Some of the highlights on the story map were climate change sensitivity. There are a lot of really powerful images and information there, and also reimagining neighborhoods. So we're looking at over time how our land use has changed, and this tool can answer a lot of questions. We see land use change from pre-colonization, kind of this sustainable way of living in harmony, to present day, just a lot of urbanization, and envisioning our future, the potential of 15-minute cities, the idea of building up, not out, to reduce urban sprawl. And so what can you do to support infill housing development? This is a really wonderful solution, not only to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also to curb urban sprawl, which impacts all sensitive species. We can reimagine our neighborhoods into 15-minute communities and utilize infill housing to reduce urbanization, encroaches on wild lands. And this solution could also limit habitat loss for land use change. And ultimately, the protection of biodiversity is crucial to any climate action solution.
This program is recorded, and we'll have the link on our website for her. Sorry, we couldn't pull that up for you. Good job. All right, the first R of our three. Response. Just check. Our next speaker is Ian Nieves. And he will address storm impacts on South County, especially impacts experienced by those without the infrastructure resources to recover easily. Ian is a first-year student at Cabrillo College, currently studying political science, concerned about climate change, and has several internships doing field work focusing on restoration of wetland habitats and monitoring of avian populations. Thank you, Ian.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian, and I am grateful to have the opportunity to speak in front of you all today. And I understand that we couldn't get the star map up, but Tatiana and Kathleen have still done a great job capturing the core of the climate action and adaptation plan. And so I would like to change gears with you all and talk to you about a couple of different subjects. One is my capstone project, which is an intern-led project that is going to address some aspects of climate change as well as employment opportunities in the future. Another thing that I would like to talk to you all about today is the storms that occurred recently and have heavily impacted our community. I have been blessed with the opportunity to work along all of these folks on such an important subject. Climate change has affected the entire world, and I'm grateful that our community has come together and had our government create new climate action plans for the future. And as my internship has developed, one thing that I have grown to fear is that the door will close behind me. I want for new students to come into the county, for new students to enter this political world. And so for my capstone project, one of the things that I am hoping to achieve is receive grant funding to create a new position that will hire 2 interns from Santa Cruz County and send them to New Zealand so that they can help expand our global community and create new ideas for addressing climate change. Thank you. I want this to be an opportunity for future students to reach out and learn about government policy, about climate resilience, and gain valuable leadership skills that I have learned from the people that brought me into government. And I would also like to take this opportunity and encourage you all to bring in students with you as well. And I don't mean this on just a professional level. I mean this at a human and deep level. I would appreciate it if you could connect with them emotionally and teach them about the struggles that you have had and show them that not everything is going to come easily, and it's going to be hard. But at the end of the day, the struggle is worth it. I think I speak for all of us when I say that the recent winter storms have devastated our community, especially in South County. Pajaro River flood, as well as the floods in Capitola have devastated homes, buildings, and businesses. These storms have been due to climate change, and addressing our infrastructure and the way our community reacts is going to be essential going forward. It may be a difficult concept to grasp and something that I have problems with myself. And it is going to be a matter of fact that we are going to have to live in a world that has had permanent damage. Due to that, we need to increase our resilience. This is the time that we need to come together as a community and donate our time and effort to help recover. There are people that still need help, and it is up to us to go out and help them. So I ask for you all to please donate time, and I believe I sent a link out. So there should be a link in chat where you can find a website that tells you about different volunteer opportunities, as well as a link for the Santa Cruz County Disaster Fund, which is run by the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz. And they do excellent work. And so I heavily urge you to please donate time or money to either of these things. The reason I say that is that I had the opportunity to speak with some of the people who are impacting our community. It was devastating, to say the least. These are people who have lost work for weeks, who have lost their home, and whose students had to stay out of school because it was closed. And I know that I can't help them on my own. So I urge you all, please take on mentees, help bring in the youth into this new world, and donate your time and money to these organizations that will help improve our community. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, that's powerful. Thank you. We'll post those links on our website as well. So if you help us with those links, we'll make sure those are posted. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody know all 7 goals of the CAB? Can anybody give me one of the A's in the word CAB? Adaptation. Got it. Thank you. Our next speaker is Rowena Bush. Thank you. Rowena will address how the current housing situation inherently creates barriers to environmental actions that would limit emissions. She's interested in ambitious policies and communities of care to help make change happen. She receives 2 bachelors of arts from UC Santa Cruz in June of this year. Congratulations. One's in environmental studies and the other in politics. She's interested in environmental policy at the local and the international levels and has a strong passion for taking progressive action to find policy solutions to environmental problems. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rowena Bush. I'm graduating from Santa Cruz with 2 degrees in environmental studies and politics in June. I'm extremely passionate about taking urgent and ambitious action on climate change and how local policies can influence that change, especially in a time when national policies are not doing enough to adequately slow the intensification of and promote adaptation to climate change. I believe there's a lot of good work that can be done on a local level to increase our community's resilience to climate change. However, there's some unique challenges that cities face in terms of funding and capacity that can limit their ability to properly implement adopted policies. And so considering that, during this internship, I've been working on a research project that explores factors that can hinder effective policy implementation, and found research that supports the fact that political will, government capacity, and funding availability all significantly influence likelihood of a policy being implemented. I'm really passionate about this research topic because there's no benefit to creating ambitious climate policies like the CAP if they're just going to be sitting on the shelf. And so having an ambitious community ready to advocate for rapid action towards reducing our emissions is key to ensuring the climate action plan can be implemented successfully. And then on a more personal note, as a renter in Santa Cruz County, I've seen firsthand how the housing and climate crisis are linked. So during the pandemic in 2021, I moved back to Santa Cruz to start my junior year and was stuck trying to find an affordable place to live off campus. And this experience was extremely taxing, as many places were unwilling to rent to students or had income requirements far above what a full-time college student could earn. With most listings requiring the tenant to earn 3 times the monthly rent. And some statistics is the average monthly rent for an apartment in Santa Cruz is $3,289 per month for an average of a 700 square foot apartment. Which under the standard income requirements of having to earn 3 times the monthly rent would require someone to have an income above 6 figures, specifically of $118,000 a year. And so these income requirements are standard amongst landlords in the region and have resulted in the exclusion of low-income people from our community. And during my search for housing, I was also aware that the further away I live from campus, the more emissions I would be producing for my commute. And many college students and workers have to commute long distances into Santa Cruz for their classes and jobs. And so during the development of our CAP, we found that transportation made up the largest portion of the county's emissions. And to address this, we wrote a strategy supporting building dense, affordable housing along transportation corridors in the county, which is a proven method for reducing transportation emissions. And as some of you know, the latest regional housing needs allocation plan called for 12,979 new units of housing to be built across Santa Cruz County. And so it's more important now than ever to have the community support for the many new housing projects that will come out of this process. Santa Cruz is a wonderful place to live, but it struggles to be inclusive and accessible to new residents. And people who aren't local and from the area. And people with varying income levels who might not be able to make 3 times the monthly rent. Often there are large amounts of opposition to new housing developments because they don't mesh with Santa Cruz's culture. And so there needs to be a radical shift away from this type of harmful thinking and towards an understanding that dense, affordable housing is a climate policy strategy that can be used to reduce emissions and grow diverse, thriving communities. And so in order to become a climate resilient community, we'll need to develop a community of care that focuses on stewarding our environment, welcoming new residents, and promoting non-exclusive housing policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody remember the first R? No, that's the third. No, it was a trick question. Our last speaker on the panel, and they'll have some questions in Q&A time, Jennifer Hernandez. She's going to discuss the importance of equitable policies to address climate change, including the importance of having our policymakers we represent our entire community, especially those most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. She is a second-year student at Cabrillo College, planning to transfer to UC Davis, that's my alma mater, to major in community and regional development with an emphasis on environmental policy. She is currently on the board of the Watsonville Wetlands Watch, which works to preserve and restore the natural wetland habitats of the Pajaro Valley and educate the South and Mid-County community on conservation efforts. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Fernandez, a climate policy intern who has worked with Tatiana on the climate action and adaptation plan, as well as on a separate project, my capstone project. It's titled Fields to Office. It results in bringing visuals from the agriculture land and people from South County to a wall display in the county governmental building. This project will take place at the Government Center on Ocean Street this year, 2023, and there are plans to move it to the new Nature Center in Watsonville. The pictures are local, all from Watsonville, with hopes to create a more welcoming environment to help diminish this fear of the power within these jobs, as well as a remembrance that these people are hard workers and are part of our community. It is a visual project for awareness, inclusivity, and encouragement. I am from Watsonville, coming from a family of ag workers, so I wanted to bring in this piece I felt was lacking for my community. I took this opportunity provided by the internship to express how I felt there was a need for visual connection of other members of the county. Starting this internship, I felt a level of intimidation, one created from the lack of representation and mentioning of other perspectives. I would read papers stating that they were equitable, but I would question if it actually was, just because the majority of the room seemed to be from similar backgrounds. It is a trend, and I am committed to increasing diversity of representation. Wherever I am, I will keep fighting to address these issues to ensure the next generation see they are heard, they are being acknowledged, and are welcome in this field of work to succeed. Farm workers, youth, everyone should feel welcome to enter a building without fear and enter with a feeling of belonging. It is a large task, but one I want to see continue. With this in mind, let us work towards diminishing this barrier, this lack of diversity in the workplaces we enter. We must acknowledge who is present, what visuals are there, who is not present, and what you can do to ensure we have equal representation. As we enter these workplaces, let's challenge those who claim they are equitable and the current systems created to favor certain groups. Let's stop the usage of the words equity, equitable, and diversity without actually meaning it. This only makes the word repetitive and the power of it becomes lost. The next step is not to find replacement words, rather we should make these words true. This systematic use of the words are what make entering certain workplaces feel difficult. Challenging the current system is how we'll achieve a more collaborative team and one where there is representation of the entire community to embrace their perspectives and their experiences. In the end, continuing this effort of challenging and advocating is how we will achieve a more representative group of policymakers, ones that will help reflect the needs for those most vulnerable to climate change. So let's fight with our words and our hearts for a healthier future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very inspired by having the four of you here. So, County, thank you for this great program. How did you find them?
That's an excellent, do you want me to come up there? Should I go to the podium?
You should.
Yes, get us here otherwise.
So I'm really glad you asked that question because it actually goes back to what Jennifer was just saying. It was quite a challenge. At the county, you know, we already have a long history working with interns and valuing youth contributions, especially in the county administrative office where the OR3 is located. But what I was noticing is that our connections are with UCSC, of course, with Cabrillo. But what I was seeing is that the students that we were getting through our traditional channels were the students that felt like they belonged at the county administrative office, like they belonged in government, like they belonged in an internship. And that's valuable. That's wonderful. We want interns like that. We also want interns that don't see themselves in county government, that don't feel empowered to be here because we want to lift everybody up. So what we decided to do is really lean into staff at the county administrative office that are from Watsonville, that are Latina. And it was through those connections that we were able to find this diverse group.
Excuse me, I have a question. Is it a paid internship?
The question was, is it a paid internship? And I'm very glad that you asked that. That is a core piece of this internship. We wanted to make sure that it was accessible to all. And we know that unpaid internships promote a level of systemic inequity that we did not want to support. So thank you.
But is it? Yes.
Yes, it is. And not only is it paid, but it's a competitive salary. And it includes payment for benefits.
Other questions in the audience, and we have Zoom.
So I'll bring this microphone around to people. I want to start myself with a question. I noticed that when,
Do you want to be on the camera, one of the two?
well, you can't do
Mike,
that.
Mike's over here asking the question. Go ahead.
So I noticed when Tatiana described things we could do, that absent from the list of you could get electric vehicles, we could ride our bicycles, we could walk. Absolutely no mention of public transit. I serve on the transit board, so I'm kind of interested in this question, but to me, that's really the key, because public transit, you can do a lot of things. I ride my bicycle to work and so forth, but a lot of people can't get to work on their bicycles, and they can't walk to work. They're not able to afford an electric vehicle, but a decent public transit system that actually gets you where you're going as quickly as you can go in your car is kind of essential. Generally, experts in the area think about 15-minute frequencies kind of critical to that, at least on the major routes. And one of the interns talked about the importance of housing on major corridors. Basically, the transit district right now is involved in a process of trying to assess what would it take in terms of resources for us to be able to have 15-minute service on the major corridors throughout the county. We're also working on a bus on shoulder project that would bring people from Watsonville and back a lot more rapidly than before. And I mean, transportation is about, people disagree, but between everybody would agree, between 40 and 60% of the climate change problem. So arguments, it's 40 and 60, but it's a big chunk, let's say, whatever your views are. And so people can contribute here, not that they should ride the bus, that'd be great, but even more important than riding the bus is being willing to support a vigorous bus system that requires some local support. I mean, we're going to probably have some tax measure, I don't know what it's going to be or when, that's going to ask people, you know, if you want to move from a pretty good transit system for a small community to a really a system that people would ride as an alternative to driving to work alone in their car, it's going to take some kind of local tax. And having people be willing to support that is really the key, whether or not they actually ride the bus themselves. And so people should be looking for that. And again, one of the interns talked about the fact that there's resistance to concentration in housing going up rather than spreading out in sprawl, which is leads to other transportation problems. So I mean, there are things people can do that actually make a real difference. And I was on the city council for 26 years, and I can't remember hearing about housing, especially affordable housing, that didn't have a majority of the audience against whatever the project was. That's beginning to change, to be fair, in our county, but we really need people to step up and be willing to support these projects, even when it's not for them, but they, you know, to actually see this as a public policy issue that matters to them. So I would really strongly suggest that some of the public transit be integrated a little bit more in this presentation, because I think it's something that's very real and can make a really substantial difference, much more than some people could buy an electric car. Because there's, I mean, if you have a decent public transit system, it's affordable, gets you there, it comes frequently, it's dependable, you know that you won't be late for work and so forth, people would ride it, and we need to have some public support for that. That's an issue to taxpayers, and we need to get out there and sort of get people supporting this kind of an effort. I'm going to open this now to other questions, so raise your hand, I'll bring you the mic, start in the back, and we'll come back up here.
And as you hear this being a question for you, please walk on over here.
Thank you. I really appreciate the emphasis on the urban core and the connection to transportation and housing has been described. My question is that one of the elements of the transition to a decarbonized economy is the concept of a just transition to make sure that local people benefit economically from this. And so what is the capacity of the county in ensuring that all of these projects, whether it's housing or transportation system or solar panels or charging stations, that it can prioritize local contractors and local workers who then can benefit from this change?
Thank you for asking that because that's also a priority of ours. And that's actually something that came up during the CAP when I was talking about those work groups that we formed. And one of the suggestions and one that we're taking on is to prioritize local agencies that would apply to do the work that is not only going to be in the CAP, but in the general plan and the housing element. And our goal for that is not just to, support our local economy, but the carbon footprint that's associated with having people drive over here from across the hill. Primarily, that's where folks would be coming from. But yes, that is definitely a goal of ours. And I also wanted, before I go any further, I just want to acknowledge somebody that's in the audience that is very important for all of you to know. That's our Assistant County Administrative Officer, Elisa Benson. And I just want to open it up to Director Dave Reed and ACAO Benson. If there's anything that you would like to add while I'm answering questions, I want you to feel comfortable saying anything.
Other questions?
So I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this because it's kind of complicated. But I know that we have gone from depending on PG&E to this other organization that now is on my bill that you mentioned. So if we dealt PG&E out of the mix, who is going to be responsible for replacing the electrical transmission infrastructure that we are going to need if everybody has an electric home and an electric car? Who's going to go with that if we now have this ECE, I think that's what the initials are, in charge of that, because we're just not giving PG&E any money. And to replace that infrastructure, they're going to need money, or somebody's going to need money. It's going to cost a lot of money. And this is very important to me.
I'm going to hand the microphone over to ACAO Benson for this question.
Thank you. Elisa Benson, one of the assistant CAOs. A great question. So the 3C community choice aggregator, which is this model where we are pooling our shared electric demand, and we then buy our own sources of generation. We are still in a relationship with PG&E around the maintenance and reconstruction of that infrastructure. So on that bill that you get, yes, it goes to 3CE. 3CE pays PG&E for that infrastructure. That is a really fair question, because when you talk about how things shift in terms of electricity, is how is that underlying transmission structure going to be able to handle it? Those are the kinds of conversations that happen more at the state level with the CPUC around what does it mean to have infrastructure that will support that over time. So you're still paying a piece to PG&E, and that's being mediated through 3CE. Did you want to?
I don't think it's enough to replace our aging infrastructure.
That may be true. And I think that's one of the things, almost to your point as well.
They're in bankruptcy.
Yeah, so your question is that, is there enough going in to change the capacity of the electric infrastructure to support true electrification? That's your question.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. I don't know that we are paying enough, and what I wanted to go with that is that question of conversion to a clean economy, to a clean infrastructure is going to take money. It's gonna take things like putting it into public transportation. It's going to take large investment that's beyond the local level to really bring us to a place where we can do that. It's also gonna take reduction in consumption in other places. So I think it's a both and moment where it's like, yes, we have to do a better job with the infrastructure we have, and we need to use less. So, I mean, there's a lot of conversation now around the economic viability of, say, individual solar, right? You know, okay, does it make sense? But a distributed grid, distributed generation is another way that we have a more resilient electrical infrastructure. We haven't even talked about, you still get, you know, natural gas from PG, right? That's another piece that we are slowly having to work through. But you're spot on that, you know, we're gonna have to do a lot, we're gonna have to pay more to undo the system that we've created.
Okay,
Oh, thank you. I want to say something to this adorable gentleman. I think the most important thing is you are here. You are here. And I want to introduce him to Tony Campus, the service campus sometime. He would be a great resource to you. I am grateful for something. I graduated from Watsonville High in 1961. I had to carry a car to live in Santa Cruz because at one time there were only 2 high schools. Great competition, and but I think the important thing is that you are representing a group of people, yourself, your age group, so you can translate to them what can be done, what we all can do on various levels. And 20 years ago, instead of driving my little sports cars around like I did in my 20s and 30s in Placer County, which actually was kind of environmentally sound, the little English roadsters, my father would have got a tag from Fort Ord if he could have, because I was such a terrible driver. But 20 years ago, I took the bus by Trader Joe's and slept till the Iditarod, got my other hour's sleep, and then took 2 buses to Lee High School. I got there 5 buses connecting from Santa Cruz County with Santa Clara County quicker than I could have even tooled around had I still had my Triumph. So that was really environmentally sound. And at 50, I needed that extra hour of sleep. At 4 o'clock, I got back on my metro and came back to Santa Cruz, slept another hour. So I ended up getting 2 hours sleep and letting some professional drivers do that. So that was 2000, and it was fun. And my sweetie used to kid me, he says, I thought you swore by going around in your little sports car. And by the way, in 1968, our car dealership where Pacific Avenue and Front Street get together, for that car dealership, I was their first customer in 1968, a young couple, 25, same age as I. The father-in-law staked him. He said, I'll buy you 2 sports cars. Every one you sell, I'll order 2 more. And it was the first day he opened, just like in the lot, nothing sitting there, but it's 2 cars. And so his father-in-law couldn't believe it. When I came back from Valley National with the sticker, I said, if you put gas in it, I'm buying it. And his father-in-law was there. I can't believe you sold a sports car your first day. I just ordered 2 more. And that's how that car dealership got there, by a good father-in-law. He didn't buy him 20 cars. He said, you got to sell them. And so by like in a month, at the end of the month, he was in business. And this is the way we build a community. And out in Para, we're watching them and we're trying to get them up on the plateau by Pacific Golf Course. We need to get a resource there when they start flooding. But one thing they did do 2 years ago, when they dredged the river, that gave 2 more feet, or it would have flooded rivers had they not had the view to dredge it a couple of years ago. So that was some progress, or they really would be swimming around with the. But thank you for being here and our lovely interns. This is how we learn.
I just want to say thank you, and I think I agree with you with what you mentioned about being the link for other students. And that is actually something that I am extremely grateful for the opportunity that I had. During the development of the climate action and adaptation plan, we did actually hold a couple of roundtable meetings in which we invited local nonprofits and really community-based organizations that came in and gave us so many great ideas. And among them, there were some that were student-led. And so we had the opportunity to hear the voices of our youth. And I am extremely grateful that we have people in our government that are more than willing to listen, that want to listen to our youth.
But explain to the grandparents, because we're older. And so for you and to speak in their language, to explain to them, because they may be older, but they're still intelligent. And so they're waiting for you to lead them.
My turn. Oh, you're gonna hold it. Hey, I'm Kim DeSerpa. On the board for Pajaro Valley Unified School District, and I'm super inspiring to have young people speaking to us today. So thank you all for being here. You all did a great job. My question centers around electrifying our fleets of buses, et cetera. So in Pajaro Valley, we've been getting federal grants and state grants to switch out our gas burning buses and put more and more and more electric buses in. I'm wondering about the grants that come into the county, and are we applying for every single federal opportunity with all of the infrastructure from the Biden bill, et cetera? I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Actually, I'm on the transit board, I can quickly respond to that. We're applying for every grant we possibly can, right? We just got $40 million, a big portion of which is going to purchase additional electric buses. And we've now committed that we will no longer, the transit district will no longer buy buses that are either that are not carbon neutral, either hydrogen buses or battery operated buses. So earlier we had a plan, so we're moving our way towards electrification. Now we're hell bent on getting there in a hurry. And so we're applying, we have people that are working full time doing nothing but applying for these grants.
So a follow-up question is, as a district, we're like Santa Cruz looking at building some workforce housing on some of the properties that we own. And I'm just wondering, depending on how many units we're able to put up, will those units actually count towards the 12,000 units that the county is supposed to provide or mandated to provide? I don't know the answer to that.
You know, I'm gonna hand this over to Director Dave Reed. This is his area of expertise.
Sure. So that number, that 12,000 number is, as was stated, encompasses all of the county. So all of the jurisdictions have a regional housing needs allocation number. So depending on where that housing is proposed to be developed and whether it requires a rezoning or not, it may be included in that number. So each city in the county has a number that we have to achieve in terms of available developable housing units. So the county is working on their regional housing needs as allocation in their housing element update now. Depending on where that property is, it may fall into the unincorporated county or the city of Watsonville. It may help get them to their number. So it just kind of partially depends on what land use policy is needed to accomplish that development, if there's a rezoning involved, as well as
Hey, the point was made earlier that one of the priorities of the county is to have more charging stations. And I wondered, is that just a goal and intention of hope, or is there some kind of a program? What would be the specifics and what role would the county play in trying to establish more charging stations? Thank you.
So we're coming at this from two routes. So the county is working on a project, and Director Dave Reed is one of the principal partners on this project. And this project, the goal is to put EV charging stations on county property. And it's gonna be available to county vehicles, but also to the public. So we're coming that route in terms of county infrastructure. But then this regional collaborative that we're a part of, it's County of Santa Cruz, County of Monterey and County of San Benito, and then the cities, Santa Cruz, Watsonville, and Salinas, and then also Ecology Action. What we're doing is we're applying for, multi-million-dollar grants to put EV charging stations throughout the region. And this is not just a pie in the sky kind of thing. This is very real. We've hired a consultant that is putting together the grant application for us. And then we're also partnering with the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, who is also doing the same thing. So AMBAG is focusing on putting EV charging stations in places where people work and in rural areas. So we're partnering with entities that are doing this. And when I say it's not pie in the sky, this is not like we're applying for a grant and then, fingers crossed that we get it. The grant landscape is such that through the IRA, the federal government wants counties, well, primarily regions to apply for these funds. They want to provide them to regions. So it's really up to regions to apply for these grant monies. Does that answer your question?
Yes, my question is just around CEQA and what the county's stance is on that. It seems like there's been a lot of discussions about loosening those rules. And, in the early days of CEQA, we thought that was going to be good. And obviously there's things that it's holding up. And I'm just wondering what the latest thinking is about that, to just get myself further up to date on the newest perspective and how it might be impacting what you're talking about today.
Sure. So I'm going to answer that question in terms of the county's cap. And then I want to see if you want to have anything to add to that, Dave. So our climate action strategy, our 2013 climate action strategy, was not a CEQA plan. This is not a CEQA plan. And we did a thorough analysis before we made that decision. And we consulted with our city partners, City of Watsonville, who does have a CEQA plan, and City of Santa Cruz. And what our partners told us is that it was more limiting than advantageous to have a CEQA plan. And the reason why is that the requirements were so stringent that they couldn't go straight into implementing strategies that fit where their jurisdiction was already. They had to backtrack and do things just to check boxes. And we didn't want to do that. We felt like we had made great strides with our 2013 plan, and we're already ahead of the curve and wanted to make bold steps moving forward. So that's where we are in terms of this plan. But Dave, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure. So I think the thing I would add is that CEQA has been a tool for many years to make development more complicated. It's been a mechanism by which one lens of the environmental movement has sought to stop development. So I think what we're trying, there are a number of organizations, the county being one of them, that are performing the CEQA analysis for many of the land use policies that we're working on right now. So the county adopted the first general plan amendment updates in over 20 plus years, the Sustainable Santa Cruz County Planning Update. And that had a CEQA component to it, just to identify the environmental impacts associated with those land use change policies. The Regional Transportation Commission is undergoing a CEQA process to look at both the development of the rail corridor, but also housing along that rail corridor. So environmental protections are still a very, very important part of our community's fabric. But what we need to do is recognize that we are not planning to build out in our urban or our rural community. We, as a community in 1978, with the creation of Measure J and the urban services line, have defined that line. But what we really need to do is recognize that the density needs to go up within that. And so those CEQA efforts that are being done by the county, by the Regional Transportation Commission, hopefully will address the acute impacts of a specific development and understand that holistically, it's better for us to build higher density in our urban environment than continue to push people to either more affordable rural or more affordable farther away, where then they have to transport themselves in via personal vehicles, because there is no bus service from Salinas to Santa Cruz that gets you here effectively and quickly. So it's not that we at the county or anybody in the community wants CEQA to go away, but we do need to reduce that development time so that we can get projects built, and those projects and those land use policies that are changing are trying to take care of some of that CEQA work up front, so that then the developer doesn't have as high a lift, both financially and temporally, developing the housing and the other things.
That's very helpful.
If there are folks online who have a question, they can put it in the chat and we will read your question for you. Meanwhile, there's some people here in the room who think number here, anybody with a hand up?
First off, thank you all for being here and the work that you're doing. I think what you're doing is incredible. I guess my question stems around sort of the 2-step forward, 1-step back kind of thing that we got going on, where the state is doing some things that is really promoting and encouraging infill development and just sustainable planning, such as the CEQA issue, and taking away sort of the discretion of local governments to reject housing projects that meet objective criteria, right? Or are infill development, or are within a certain amount of distance from public transit and things like this. And then there's other things that are going on, like say, at least it's my understanding, the PUC taking away incentives to develop solar, and then also things going on at higher levels of government, like for example, the 9th District rejecting Berkeley's electrification ordinance, essentially. So I guess my question just stems on how the county is grappling with some of the more difficult roadblocks that are being put in place to make sort of transitioning to a more green economy more complicated. It's a big question. But I guess I'm just curious on what the thoughts are with the county and things like that.
I don't know if you're gonna like my answer. It's one day at a time, one step at a time. I mean, the layers, the structures that we have in place today took decades to put in place today. So it is something where we all have to come together and have honest conversations about those things, honest conversations about why did we do that then? Who benefited from that? And what do we think about it today? I want to raise up what you guys said. I mean, this change is not free. We're all going to have to lean in, and particularly those of us with privilege we need to, do a little bit more because we can. But I think it is one step at a time. As we look at, this, we cannot understate the update of our general plan. I mean, this is a big thing for this county to do, to say, we have to look at development differently in the unincorporated area. And it was a long time coming. And I think, Dave lived through the initial development of that sustainability plan, that chapter. And I think we were all geared and ready for potentially hostile and contentious moment when the board was going to vote on these changes. Like it was, because that was not an easy process to go through to start that change in mindset about what do we want our built environment to look like here. And we were just talking about this. It was a quiet meeting on December 13th, as we adopted the cap, and we did that same day. So something has changed in this community, a readiness to do things that seemed impossible before. It seems to be forward. So we're trying to, in this team, leverage that every day. I think one of the things I wanted the chance to share with this team is, before when you came, I've been doing climate related work for a long time in my old county in Washington State as well. And when we first were approaching these questions, we brought our engineers, we brought our scientists, because it was a technical question. We are now beyond that. We need them, they're part of it. This is a systems change. That's why we have someone who does systems change leading this, not an engineer. Engineers are on our team, but we have to look at how this is going to
permeate through all of our systems and face those questions. So again, I'm not maybe being super specific because it's like, it's in the air, it's in the water. We have to like look at it in every step and give ourselves time, patience, grace, and bravery as we face this, because we are going to have to construct something different than we have today.
Do you have any from online as well?
I'm gonna apologize in advance. This is not gonna start with a question, but just an appreciation of all that you're bringing here. And is it Lisa? Lisa, I think it's really critical that we're starting to talk about the systems change and thinking that we all have to make. I think of the seed or the time that we go back to when a lot of this happened was in the 40s and 50s, right? And the transportation being one of the top 3 environmental impacts today. Changing that alone, we know a report by Harvard University in 2015 said that the #1 barrier out of poverty is a lack of robust public transportation or access to that. This was a huge study. So I'm just piggybacking on what Mike said earlier. Really essential that basically in the 40s and 50s, our country had the #1 public transportation system in the world. And that ripping out of all those systems and the sprawl that happened and the building not only undermined us economically because we can't keep up with the infrastructure improvements that have to happen. It also systematized racism and classism across our country. And we still feel that today because it costs 10 to 14K to keep a car. People can't afford it. Our elders and people who can no longer drive can't drive a car. So having a system that includes public transportation as a key component and the urban infill that builds up around them is our way out and thinking towards that future. We have to think future 100 years into the future, not 10, not 20, but 100 years. And how do we want that to look? So I apologize if that's not a question, but I urge us all to work together to think 100 years into the future. Thank you.
Time for maybe one more question, Sandra?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Very well done. You were taking a broad view that I think is really important as our candidates. And then narrowing it down to programs. I have just 2 little items that get down to a couple specifics. One of them is regarding EV charging. One thing I've noticed, I'm an EV driver, and I do not depend upon public charging because oftentimes they're unreliable. And I don't drive a Tesla, so I don't have one of those to go to, but I'm saying we need reliability, we need maintenance with regard to EV charging. And the other thing I want to make a comment on is high density housing. I'm probably one of those who was really resistant to it initially, and I have come around. However, one part of high density housing, I think we could make a change. And it would make things more acceptable. If they just didn't look like prisons. If we had housing that was actually attractive and accommodated people and children and had greenery and native plants and things that would be more restorative, I think that would make it more acceptable to more people.
So that's a really good point, and I want to make a connection for people. And it was actually brought up around the state and federal and local control and what the state is telling us what to do. So when we create internal barriers to building our housing through opposition to a specific project, and we don't continue to build the housing we need, the state looks at us and looks at counties like us and cities and communities like ours and says, you're not doing your job. We're going to take the control away from you. And we're going to allow a developer to build on spec whatever they want. So the key is to retain local control. That gives us an opportunity to have design control or design influence on what a building looks like. Because a developer, a box is the cheapest thing they can build. articulated facades, stepped back second, third stories to create pedestrian-friendly multi-story development is something that local government can control through a design review process. But if we don't build the housing we need and we lose that local control because the state gives the control to the developer to say, look, that land is in this location, you can build 6 stories, we don't care what it looks like. So we have to be thinking about that in an effort to retain the local control, so that we have a little bit of that design influence and we have a little bit of that opportunity to say, no, your first idea of a box is not acceptable. We want that second or third story to be stepped back so there's a pedestrian scale, or we want articulations of the facades that more of the residents have natural light than the residences. Those are the types of things that we gain by having local control, and the things that we lose if we don't build the housing. So it's like this interesting dynamic tension that I wanted to build a connection to your comment, which is great.
Thank you. Okay, we're wrapping up. I'm gonna throw something into this mic with me. I love our interns to come stand up here and I'm gonna ask you a question, give you the mic, and you're gonna have like 30 seconds to answer. They're gonna be timing it. No pressure. And I'm not sure which end I'm gonna start with yet, so you can all be very nervous.
We're really on.
I'm interested in knowing if you could change one thing, just one tangible thing, what would you change? And where do you think you're gonna go next? Okay, why don't we start with the one who made eye contact? Come on up here. That would be you. That's you. Everybody, if you stand up now, then we'll do this quickly. Come on up here.
Okay. One thing I would change is having more robust tenant protections in place so that when these improvements for electrification and making buildings more attractive and green, that way that having more robust tenant protections will prevent like the gentrification from happening and pushing low-income people out of snow. And next, I'll maybe be moving somewhere more affordable. I would love to stay in Santa Cruz, but I'm potentially going to be moving to Sacramento after my graduation.
And doing what?
I'm not sure yet, but I'm applying for the Civic Spark AmeriCorps program and do environmental consulting groups. So we'll see what happens.
Jennifer.
All right, well, something I would want to see or be changed is, okay, I'm a big plant person, greenery, flowers, that's me. So I would want to ensure that greenery is everywhere and it doesn't affect the cost of living here. We usually see trees and beautiful bushes and beautiful neighborhoods, but they're so expensive. So I would want it to be a norm everywhere without having it affect the cost. And that would just be amazing coming from someone that absolutely loves plants and the colorful greenery from everywhere. And then for the future, I will be graduating from Cabrillo, attending Davis, and then considering grad school. And so I will be continuing my education and then going on from there, but still keeping in mind my passions for advocacy, for my community, and for environmental justice.
Ian.
If I could change one thing, and I'm going to go and make this something that isn't necessarily feasible at the moment, but it's something that I would love to see. And that is seeing the budgets for our schools go up in general across the country. I would love for our schools to have budgets to teach them foreign languages, to teach them arts, to teach them critical thinking skills that they're going to need in life. And so if I could change one thing, it would be increasing our education budget. And as for what I'm going to do in the future, If I'm completely honest, I don't know. What I do know is that I am extremely happy in a position to be able to help. And what I do know is that I want to continue to work for the public, to find an organization that is going to help grow my community and create a stronger community at the end of the day. That is what I want for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen. You all should be thinking about the one thing you would change.
One thing I would change would be, so through this internship, I've learned a lot about governance structures and it was included at the table in decision making. You know, not just these buzzwords that we use, but actually who do these changes benefit. And one thing I've learned a lot about is indigenous land management techniques and the impacts on wildfires. We're seeing these mega fires and it's just more recent, you know, hundreds of years that we've been suppressing fire. There's a lot of different land management techniques that are traditional that have been around well before we have. And I think that including, you know, indigenous people of color in these conversations and management strategies is really important in how we move forward. And how I see myself moving forward. I see myself in environmental consulting. I'm graduating in a few weeks. Also, don't really know, I'm kind of figuring it out. But yeah, and similar to Rena, I live in Monterey Seaside, but I don't see myself staying here, looking for someplace bigger city, maybe someplace more affordable. Yeah.
Thank you, very inspiring. Okay. 3 R's. As always, I want to thank all of you who presented and thank you particularly for the work you're doing and for the work you will be doing to move forward. Congratulations, particularly for those who are graduating in a couple of weeks and next month. Yay. The future holds great promise with talented and dedicated, I'll call you climate warriors. So thank you for that. Our program today was recorded and available on our website in the coming weeks, and we'll have some links up there as well. Mark your calendars. The Democratic Women's Club Summer Picnic is what date, remember? August 6th. August 6th, noon to 3 p.m. And our next forum is on May 20th. It's on fire, storm, and flood. And thank you all for joining us today. And thank particularly the 2 mics. Raise your hand, mics, for pulling all this together. Thank you.
Where is the May 20th going to be? Will it be in this room?